a few minutes to join. So hopefully we've got most people on the webinar now. So thank you all for joining. This is the CQC National Maternity Survey exploring the 2019 results. My name's Katie Ratcliffe. I'm the Senior Transformation Manager for NHS England on maternity. Sorry, we're just having a bit of a technical glitch here. I'm trying to do slides and speak at the same time and it keeps muting me. So in front of you there, you can see the agenda. So in a moment, we'll introduce you to the people who are going to be speaking to you today. This presentation will also be recorded and we'll be able to send it around afterwards. So you'll be able to watch it again at your own pace. Okay, so we were looking today at the overview of the 2019 CQC survey results. I think it's okay for me to say at this stage that we were really pleased with the results that we've seen this year. We've seen improvement across all the questions from the 2018 survey, and I think that shows us that the extent of the hard work that's going on across the system at the moment. Then we're going to present to you a tool that we've been used to segment the data, and it means that you'll be able to use it locally to inform your work on the ground. Then we'll be looking at co-production of local action plans to address local priorities. We've got National Maternity Voices on the line who are going to speak to that. And then we'll go through some of the plans that we've got for the 2020 survey. And then we'll save all questions to the end, please. We'll have 20 minutes. We have my colleague here, Lisa Ramsey, will be monitoring the chat box on this webinar. So please submit your questions on the chat box and we'll be able to respond to as many of your questions as we can at the end of the presentation. And again, if you don't mind just going on mute, please, because obviously this webinar. Thank you. Okay, so today, yes, my name's Katie Ratcliffe, as you can see there, and then we've got James Wallace here, who's a Senior Analytical Manager at NHS England and Improvement. Isabel Carter, who's the Analytical Officer for NHS England and Improvement. We've got Ian Baker, who's the Analytical Officer from NHS England and Improvement. Laura James, who's the core team for the National Maternity Voices. Please can you just mute if you are joining this webinar. Thank you. And then we have Amy and Adam and Nicola, who are all from the CQC to answer your questions as well and to present. So let's get into the body of the presentation.
Sorry, just before you start, I've not got started the presentation. I have emailed Lisa this morning, but I've still not got started the presentation. I was wondering, could Lisa just send me that over now, that invite?
Same here as well.
We will be recording this presentation and we will send it around after the recording.
Okay, right. Okay then, thank you.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Yep. So I'm Izzy Carpenter, I'm an analyst working in NHS England and Improvement, and I'm just going to be going through the results of the 2019 CQC National Maternity Survey. So a little bit about the survey. The 2019 maternity survey involved 126 NHS trusts in England. Women who gave birth between the 1st and the 28th of February 2019 were invited to take part in the survey, and if a trust did not have the minimum of 300 eligible births, then births in January were also included. Fieldwork took place between April and August 2019, and responses received from more than 17,151 women, a response rate of 37%. So the key messages from the survey. As in previous years, the 2019 survey results demonstrate that most women continue to report positive experience of their care across the maternity pathway. Between 2017 and 2018, only a small number of questions showed a continuation of the improvement seen in many aspects of women's experience between 2013 and 2017. In 2019, the survey results are more positive. There are 29 questions in the survey, which are scored by CQC for the purposes of benchmarking trust performance, and for which the score is comparable between the 2018 and 2019 survey results. Of these questions, 22 questions showed an improvement in score at a national level, while just 2 questions showed a deterioration. So a little bit about subgroup analyses. CQC looked at how different groups of women rated their experience by using statistical analysis. The subgroup analysis compared the mean scores for subsets of questions by different groups, allowing an exploration of the relationships between women's characteristics and their experiences. The subgroups used in the analysis were age, named midwife, parity, type of delivery, stirrups usage, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, long-term conditions.
Can you go on mute? You are not speaking at the same time. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, so subgroups were also sexual orientation, long-term conditions, and index of multiple deprivation. This year, the analysis did not identify significant differences between groups except for one, which was women who did not want to disclose their religion had a poorer experience of information during labour. So the following slides include an exploration of the differences in results from some individual questions between ethnic groups. It's important to note that CQC did not identify any significant differences between ethnic groups in the results for the subsets of questions that they looked at. Okay, so the results for questions about choice and personalisation. So there are positive results showing improvement over time in women's responses to questions about the personalisation of their care. So on this graph, you'll be able to see that 5 different questions have been included. So we always given enough time to ask questions or discuss pregnancy, antenatally, and a few others. And you can see that across all of those 5 questions, we've seen a positive improvement over time from 2013 to 2019. 2/3 of women were offered a choice of hospitals to give birth in, and more than half were offered the choice to give birth in a midwife-led unit birth centre. So in this graph, we have shown the split of where women were offered a choice of hospitals, midwife-led unit or birth centre, consultant-led unit at home, or was not offered any choices. So 66% said they were offered a choice of hospitals, 55% said they were offered a choice of midwife-led units or birth centres, 25% said they were offered a choice of consultant-led unit, 43% said they were offered a choice of giving birth at home, and 12% said they were not offered any choices. These results exclude women who said they were not offered a choice due to medical reasons. The survey question is also not comparable to surveys before 2019 due to changes in the question response options. So for the same question, 2 out of 10 women in the other ethnic group were not offered any choice about where to have their baby compared to 1 in 10 in the white group. So we can see quite a big difference there. The graph also shows the 95% confidence interval. So we've got 10.4% of white women were not offered any choice compared to 19.6% in the other ethnic group. Less than half of the women surveyed were offered a choice about where their postnatal care would take place. However, there was a considerable increase in women being offered this choice between 2018 and 2019. So from 2018, the result was 42%, up to 48% in 2019. Fewer white women were given a choice about where their postnatal care would take place compared to all other ethnic groups. So 45% of white women were given a choice about where their postnatal care would take place, and this was the lowest compared to 52, 64, 67 and 69% in the other ethnic groups. So if we move on to the results for infant feeding. 2 in 3 women felt that midwives and other health professionals gave them active support and encouragement about feeding their baby. So there's 2 questions in this graph. Were your decisions about how you wanted to feed your baby respected by midwives? And the results show the yes, always. And did you feel that midwives and other health professionals gave you active support and encouragement about feeding your baby? Also yes, always. So in 2019, 2 in 3 women felt that midwives and other health professionals gave them active support and encouragement about feeding their baby, and 85% reported that their decisions about how they wanted to feed their baby were respected by midwives. So for the same question, fewer white women felt that midwives and other health professionals gave them active support and encouragement about feeding their baby. So we can see from this graph that 68% of white women felt that midwives and other health professionals gave active support and encouragement about feeding their baby, which compared to 72, 75, 77 and 78% for the other ethnic groups. The other question about whether or not the how you wanted to feed your baby was respected by midwives was pretty similar across the board. Safety, including results about whether women are listened to. More women are feeling listened to in all parts of the maternity pathway, though there are fewer positive responses about being listened to postnatally at home. So here we've got 2 of the questions. During your antenatal checkups, did your midwives listen to you? And that's gone from 79% in 2013 up to 83% in 2019. And if you raised a concern during labour and birth, did you feel that it was taken seriously? Has gone from 80% in 2013 up to 84% in 2019. While the majority of women report that if they raised a concern during labour and birth, it was taken seriously, around 1 in 6 women report that it was not. So for the same question, there was very little variation between ethnic groups in whether women's concerns were taken seriously during labour and birth. We can see that it all varies around 81 to 85% across all of the ethnic groups. More of those in the other ethnic groups felt they were always listened to during antenatal care and postnatal care at home compared to the white group. So we've also got confidence intervals on these graphs just to show how confident we are in these results. So areas identified as needing improvement by CQC. The first section is availability of staff. 7 in 10 women were always able to get a member of staff to help them when they needed it during labour and birth, while 3 in every 100 women were not. So we've got 72% there for yes always, 16% on yes sometimes, 3% for no, and 9% had a member of staff with them at all times. 6 in 10 women were always able to get a member of staff to help them when they needed it in hospital after the birth, while 6 in every 100 were not. So 62% for yes always, 31% for yes sometimes, and 6% for no. 7 in 10 women saw a midwife as much as they wanted at home after the birth of their baby. However, there's been a downward trend since 2017. So in 2017, this figure was 75%, down to 73% in 2018, and down further to 70% in 2019. 4 in 10 Asian or Asian British women reported that they would have liked to have seen a midwife more often postnatally, compared to around 2 out of 10 white women. Again, that's quite a big difference there across the ethnic groups. So we've got 23% for white women who would have liked to have seen a midwife more often postnatally, 34% mixed, 40% Asian or Asian British, 36% Black or Black British, and 36% for other ethnic group. Continuity of carer. Nearly 1 in 10 women reported that one of their postnatal midwives had been involved in both their labour and antenatal care. So 9% said yes, my postnatal midwife has been, one of my postnatal midwives had been involved in labour and antenatal care. 36% reported antenatal care only, 2% reported labour only, and 54% said no. There has been an increase in the proportion of women that reported that one or more of their postnatal midwives had been involved in their labour or antenatal care from 2018 to 2019 across all ethnic groups. So that's really good. We can see an increase here from 6 to 7% for white, 14 to 17% for mixed, 10 to 14% for Asian or Asian British, 8 to 14% for Black or Black British, and 18 to 21% for other ethnic group. There is notable scope for improvement in midwives' awareness of women's medical history. 1 in 2 women reported that their midwives always appeared to be aware of their medical history during antenatal checkups, while just 1/3 of women reported that this was the case sometimes. Just over 1/3 of women reported that this was the case sometimes. 3 in 4 women reported that their midwives appeared to be aware of their medical history during their postnatal appointments, which also shows notable scope for improvement. This has remained fairly static across the years, from 2013 at 77% and at 77% in 2019, with a little bit of movement in between. Perinatal mental health. 6 out of 10 women were given information about any changes they might experience to their mental health after having their baby. However, more than 1 in 10 were not. So when asked the question, were you given information about any changes you might experience to your mental health after having your baby? 63% said yes, definitely, 25% yes to some extent, and 12% said no. 8 out of 10 women were told who they could contact if they needed advice about any changes they might experience to their mental health after the birth. 2 in 10 were not. So that's 80% compared to 20% for that question. 4 out of 10 women reported that at the postnatal checkup, around 6 to 8 weeks after the birth, the GP spent enough time talking to them about their own mental health. Results were similar for the equivalent question on physical health. So the lighter blue bar is the physical health question, and the darker blue is the mental health question, and they're both pretty similar. So 42% for physical said yes, definitely, 40% for mental health. And the other 2 questions, yes to some extent, 30% for both, and 29% said no about physical health, and 30% said no for mental health. Antenatal classes. 7 out of 10 women were offered antenatal classes, but only 3 out of 10 decided to take them up. 3 out of 10 were not offered at all. So this is for the question, during your pregnancy, were you offered any antenatal classes or courses provided by the NHS? 30% said yes, and I did them. 41% said yes, but I did not do them. And 29% said no. When we look at this question for ethnicity, a lower proportion of Black or Black British women were offered antenatal classes or courses provided by the NHS compared to all other ethnic groups. So we can see how that is spread out across all of the ethnic groups there. And finally, birth position. Almost a quarter, so 24% of women who had an unassisted vaginal delivery said they gave birth lying with legs in stirrups. This compares to 23% in 2018 and 22% in 2017. So we can see the split there. On the left, we've got a vaginal birth, no forceps or ventrous suction cup, and on the right, an assisted vaginal birth. And the grey bar shows lying with legs in stirrups. So for a non-assisted would be 24%, and assisted would be 89% for that question. Okay, so that pretty much covers what we've done there.
Thank you, Isabel. That's really helpful. If anybody's got any questions on Isabel's presentation, please send them through to the chat box and we'll collate them for the Q&A at the end of the session. Now I'd like to pass over to Ian Baker. He's going to introduce you to the first ever tool for breaking down these surveys so you can use them for your own work. Ian.
Okay, hello everyone. My name's Ian Baker. I'm an analyst in NHS England and NHS Improvements, and I'm going to demonstrate a visualization tool we've built around the survey. So I'll just share my screen now. Okay, you should now be able to see the tool. So I know some of you on the call will have seen this tool, others won't, but we will be sending around the tool. We'll be sending the tool around to all participants after the call. So the tool has a number of sections, so I'll work through them sequentially. Firstly, there's a little background to the survey. Probably the key points to pick up here as regards the tool is the full survey consists of 48 questions split into 8 sections. For the purposes of this tool, we're focusing primarily on the 19 sections and 3 sections relating to birth, labour and care in hospital immediately after birth, and labour. The reason focus on these is that these questions do definitely relate to care received by the trust in question, whereas the remaining 5 sections covering postnatal, antenatal, they in a number of cases they will refer to care received outside this trust. So for the purposes of comparison, we only tend to focus on the first 3 as they are directly comparable with other trusts. And next, just a little bit of background about the tool, outlining the various views and how best to use them. And we can move on to the first actual view. Okay, the first one is gives the scores at trust level. Throughout this tool, we're only looking at the overall trust level scores. We're not looking at any sort of demographic breakdown. These are just the scores for trust as a whole. So for instance, the first one we selected is Royal Berkshire. And if you want to select another trust, there's a drop-down menu at the top of the page. So for instance, you've got Barts or Birmingham Women's, so Blackpool Teaching, whichever trust you're interested in. But I'll jump back to Berkshire as that's quite an interesting one to demo. Sorry, Buckinghamshire rather. Yep, so looking at the tool, you'll see at the top of the page, we've got the 3 sections related to labour and birth, staffing, care in hospital after birth. And as mentioned earlier, these sections are the ones related to care in the trust. And the table, it's got the full text of the questions, the score for each question, along with the RAG rating. And those RAGs are taken from the published data set, their published bandings. And also a direction of change arrow indicating where there's been significant improvement or deterioration from the previous year's survey. And you'll see in this instance, the majority of the arrows are yellow or horizontal arrows, which means no change. We have got one green vertical arrow, which means significant improvements. If there are any red arrows, that'd be significant deterioration. If you scroll down slightly, we have the remaining 5 questions related to postnatal and antenatal care. These follow the same layout as the previous three questions. Difference being the bandings are not red and green; they're blue and orange. The reason for that is, as mentioned previously, these questions relate to care which may not have been provided by the trust in question. And it also has the direction of change arrows. You'll see a few boxes for which say not applicable for the change boxes. This is when this question was not directly comparable to the previous year's survey. It may be a new question. It may be a question where the text has changed, so we're not directly comparable, or it may be trust specific. Maybe last year there were insufficient numbers of respondents for that trust to make a meaningful comparison. Okay, so the remaining views, they all focus on a regional or national level, which will be of use for those of you looking at working nationally, regionally, or at STP level. So the first regional view gives a list. If you select a region, it lists all the trusts in the region, and of the labour, birth, and care in hospital questions, of those 19 questions, how many questions were the trust a negative outlier, a positive outlier, or mid-range? The purpose of this is, if you're working at a regional STP level, to quickly and easily identify which trusts are struggling or which are the better performing trusts. And you can cycle through the regions. And if you notice, as you cycle through the regions, the bottom table changes, the bottom selector rather. This is the STP selector. And as you select a region, it highlights all the STPs within that region, if you'd like to drill down further. So for instance, you can go on Cumbria, South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire. And if you want to return to viewing all the STPs in a region, you would click the clear filter icon, which is a funnel with a red cross. So if you click that, all the STPs reappear. And you can also view multiple STPs simultaneously. So there's another option at the top of the selector called multi-select. If you click multi-select, you'll see it's now highlighted. You can then select or deselect multiple STPs. So I've just deselected all of them. You could manually, for instance, select West Yorkshire and Cumbria and North East. And again, to deselect that option, which would basically then display all STPs, again, click the filter with the red X, clear filter button with the red X, and they all reappear. Okay, so if we move on to the next tab, this is another region view tab. This is slightly different. It lists all the questions within the hospital, birth, and labour and staffing sections. And when you select the region, this table says within this region how many trusts were red or green outliers. This table is useful is if at a regional level, if you're trying to look at, if you're interested in questions where there are a number of trusts who are struggling. So just select a good example. Yeah, so select London, for instance. You'll see there's one question, thinking about your stay in hospital, how clean was your hospital room or ward you were in. There are 6 out of 18 trusts who are rated as negative outliers in this area, which shows if it's maybe you may want to, this may be an area you would choose to focus on. And likewise, selecting East of England, for instance, there's one question that's there's more 3 out of 12 trusts are strong positive outliers on. So that's at the start of Labour. Did you feel you were given appropriate advice and support? So yes, so this will allow you to select areas, identify areas of good practice or areas of trust are struggling across the region. Moving on to the next sheet, this is a question view. And if you select an individual question, this ranks all the trust responses for that question nationally, and it allows you to highlight a specific trust. So you can easily see how your trust compares nationally. So, for example, if we look at the drop-down selector, select care in hospital. So the first question listed, care in hospital. On the day you left hospital, was your discharge day for any reason? So select that, click OK. Or the survey now ranks from the best performing trust to the worst for that question. And you'll see the Countess of Chester are highlighted in yellow. This is driven by the top selector at the top of the page. So you can select any trust you wish to identify where in the country they lie. So select Wirral, for instance. Yeah, Wirral are 6.5. So they're towards the top end of the scale, but they're not rated as an outlier. And moving on to the final view, this is a national table. This, if you scroll down, it lists every trust in the country who took part in the survey. And with the areas looked at in the main part of the table on the left-hand side, there's the CQC outlier report status. Now, this is a report that was report that was issued by the CQC identifying trusts that were rated as better, worse, much better, or much worse than expected across the survey as a whole. And this column identifies those who are rated as better or worse in that CQC report. Moving across, all other columns relate to the survey questions section responses related to labour, staff, and care in hospital as previously. So you've got these next three columns of section scores for those three sections. Again, lists the scores and the reg rating. Moving across, the next section of the table looks at the total number of questions where this trust is an outlier. So it identifies the number of questions that are a positive outlier, number of questions that are a negative outlier, and it's also represented graphically as well. And at the top of the scale, we've got City Hospitals, Sunderland, and Newcastle upon Tyne, who are both 11 positive, no negatives. And the next section is looking at improvement or deterioration. So questions where there's been any significant change since 2018. In terms of significant change is important because it's not just any change. I mean, in virtually every case, a trust will have improved or will have deteriorated in a question score. This is looking for significant improvement or deterioration. And this highlights the trust with the probably looks like the greatest level of change identified by the bar chart is Mid Cheshire, who've improved in 6 of 19 questions. And scrolling across beyond this to the right, we have every question listed with this score and reg rating. So the purposes of this table, this is just a single table which effectively gives you the full survey on a single sheet for these three sections. And you can filter as well. So for instance, if you're only interested in trusts who have improved, who have multiple positive outliers, so you could deselect 0. This will only highlight the trusts who have improved in at least one area. And deselect that filter. And if there's also a change, if you're looking for trusts who have improved in at least one area, you basically deselect the 0, so only select those who've improved in at least one area. That will give you all those trusts. Deselect again. And finally, there are region and STP filters. So if you're only interested in a specific region, STP rather, so Birmingham and Solihull, there are 2 trusts highlighted there. Deselect again. And if you're more interested in the region view, select Northwest region. That lists all the trusts in Northwest. And again, deselect to view all. So one thing to always remember with the filters is every time you select a filter, if you then want to filter on another area, assuming you don't just want to filter within London, always remember to deselect. Okay, and one final point as well, if you want to do any additional analysis, maybe include it in your own tools, the full data for the survey is actually in a hidden sheet. So if you click on hide and score table, this gives this is basically the gives all the data which feeds this tool. So if you're analysts within your own organisation want to do some additional analysis with the tool, all the data is here essentially. But ordinarily that view is hidden because generally speaking, you won't need to see that, but it is there if you feel you need it. So you hide that sheet again. Okay, so that's essentially the full tool. If anyone does have any questions, if they could enter them in the chat box, and we will pick them up at the end of the call as part of the Q&A session.
Great, thanks, Ian. I think that's really, really helpful and a really rich tool there with lots of multiple uses, and I think it just warrants a bit of a play. I want to go away and play with it now. So next we've got Laura James, and she's going to present on co-production and action plans, so how we can use this data locally. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Katie. I'm just going to do a very, very quick talk about how MVPs can be involved in co-producing local action plans. So we've got all this really, really rich data, and now we're going to talk about what can we actually do with it to make significant changes in our local area. Hopefully, as most of you know, best practice for any quality improvement project is to, in maternity, is to work alongside or with your Maternity Voices Partnership, which is a local multidisciplinary forum made up of service users, provider professionals and commissioners. And if you do this, you'll make sure that not only your perspectives are heard, but also that services will be developed and co-produced with the people who are actually using them. So you're actually using and making a service that's fit for purpose, as it were. So a few pointers in how to go about using this data. Firstly, I would say make sure any MVP chairs that are on the call, or indeed any other MVP member who is on the call, have this local CQC survey results as an agenda item on at your next MVP meeting. Explore your local results using the tool that Ian has just profiled for us, and also include any anonymized comments from the free text boxes that your local provider will have. So these will be really, really rich in qualitative data that women or any people who've been using the birthing the services will have given you. So use that qualitative data to see what it is that people are actually saying about the service. And then together within your MVP, identify what those priorities might be for the local area and how an MVP can help you fulfill those priorities. So these priorities might be a mixture of quick wins. So for example, we talked about choice of place of birth earlier on. It could be designing posters that have service user input into how we advertise that choice of place of birth, or it could be larger projects. And we've already heard this morning about a number of different factors in the survey. So it could be something around, I don't know, the provision of antenatal classes in your area, or improving feeding support, or why it is that women are giving birth in stirrups and lithotomy, and is there anything that the MVP can do to help reduce that rate. So identifying what is a priority in your local area is really important. And then finally, developing an action plan. So this doesn't necessarily mean that the MVP chair goes off and sorts all this out by herself. This is, what do we need to do? Who is responsible? Who can work on this project? By when? So setting realistic time frames around this, and what the next steps might be. And breaking it down like that hopefully will make sure that these local action plans will address the local priorities in your local area. If anyone has any examples of any co-production projects that they have previously done as a direct result of the CQ survey results, can you please pop them in the chat box so that we can all learn from them, because I think that would be really, really helpful. And if you have any questions around how to involve MVPs, how to co-produce those local action plans, please, again, put them in the chat box and we'll come back to them at the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Okay, so now we'd go across to Adam, Nicola and Amy at CQC, and they're going to tell us what plans we've got for the 2020 survey.
Hello, I'm Adam Pegler and I'm an analyst team leader at the Care Quality Commission, and I'm joined on the call today by my colleague Amy Hushaver-Day and Nicola Lawson. Amy was the lead here for the 2019 survey, and Nicola Lawson is now the lead for the 2020 survey. I'm here today, and just to note that Amy and Nicola are here to help answer any questions you might have, and we're happy to take them, and please put them in the chat. So I'm here today to give a brief overview of what's next for the maternity survey. As we've seen already today, the survey provides a rich overview of experiences, both nationally, so we've seen that in Isabel's presentation, and also at more local levels as well. So we've seen that with Ian's presentation and the great tool he's developed. We're looking forward to going again this year and providing an update on experiences of maternity care a year down the line from the 2019 survey. So I'm just going to cover what we're doing for the 2020 survey, and then I'm also going to talk about some pilot work we've been doing around mixed mode surveys, which feature both paper questionnaires and online questionnaires too, which is a new and exciting direction for the survey program. So in terms of the 2020 survey, it's just around the corner, and we're undertaking that survey with our research partners Picker. We'll be sampling those who gave birth under the care of NHS Trust in February 2020. So that's this month. So so that's people that have given birth so far this month and in the next few days. And also in January for trusts where relatively fewer women give birth. So we do allow trusts to sample back into January if they have fewer than 300 births at the trust. Field work, that's the period where questionnaires are sent out and returned. That will run through the spring and into summer. So that's from April to August 2020. And then we will be publishing all the results in January 2021. January is our traditional month of publication for the maternity survey, and that will hold again for the 2020. The questionnaire will be very similar to 2019. There's a couple of new questions on experiences of induced births, but that's about and maybe one or two more. But the questionnaire will be very similar to 2019 to maintain comparability across years. We will be providing results at the national level, trust level, CCG level, which we've done for a couple of years. And in addition, this year, we've got a new direction, which is the piloting of local maternity system analyses as well. So we'll be providing results for each local maternity system separately. And this, for the first time, this will allow comparison of experience by local maternity system. So from that higher level than we typically report at. So that's a new direction for the 2020 survey. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So we're also excited about our pilot we're running with research partners Ipsos Mori, who are experts in online or digital data collection and social surveys. And in this pilot, we are trialing a push to web methodology with a group of 20 trusts spread across the country. This pilot features digital contacts through SMS where available, and the methodology also involves, crucially, involves withholding a paper questionnaire until later mailings to encourage respondents to answer the questionnaire online. And we're actually experimenting with two approaches during the pilot to see which one works the best. One involving a final paper questionnaire at a fourth mailing, in addition to a paper questionnaire at the third, and one without. And we're looking to see which of those works best, and to see what impact this might have on results. We're piloting initially with a shortened questionnaire to follow best practice in digital surveys, and fieldwork has begun now for the pilot. So we're really excited about that, and that will run until May 2020, and we should be in a position to report on the outcome of those of the pilots, these experiments, as it were, in July. And so importantly, it's important to stress here the aims of the pilots. The aim is ultimately to assess feasibility of mixed mode main stage maternity surveys. That's a bit of a mouthful, but basically means maternity surveys which feature both online and paper questionnaires, so both digital and traditional data collection methods. And this is building on the success of similar inpatient pilot, which we've recently had results back, promising results back there, which suggests perhaps mixed mode main stage surveys will result in more representative surveys, reaching more groups of respondents more equally, and there are other interesting results coming out of that, including perhaps not much of a hit to response rates, which is a real success as well, and perhaps quite unexpected. We're hoping that this work will, as I've just alluded to, will hopefully make surveys more representative, and for example, encourage more younger respondents to respond. And just to point there as well is that we're hoping, we've had promising results from the inpatient pilot, and we're hoping that the maternity pilot will result in even more promising results, given that the survey targets relatively young. So yeah, that's it from me. That's an overview of the 2020 survey and our upcoming pilots. Thank you for listening.
We've got a bit of time now to respond to some of the questions that have come in. We've got 7 so far, so I think Lisa's been furiously monitoring the chat box and has been sharing them out amongst the team. So Lisa.
Thank you, Katie. So starting at the beginning, thank you, Kate Thurland. We had a question from you around named midwife and if this is continuity of carer. James, can I come to you on that one?
Yeah, sure. So I'll ask CQC colleagues to step in if I get this wrong. But when the subgroup analysis is
Sorry.
Hi there, it's James here. Sorry, I've got a problem with my microphone, so I was wittering away there and nobody can hear me. The subgroup analysis that CQC carry out, when they look at the named midwife, they use 2 questions which ask women whether they saw the same midwife for all their appointments during the antenatal period, and then whether they saw the same midwife for all their appointments during the postnatal period. So it's those 2 questions that inform that subgroup in the subgroup analysis. CQC, please do let me know if I've got that wrong or you want to add anything to it.
No, I think that's correct. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks, James. So moving on to our next question. Thank you. This is from Lucy Pearsall, which was related to the ethnic breakdown of respondents. James, is that something else we can come to you on?
It is, yeah. So the ethnic breakdown, there was 84% white respondents, 9% Asian or Asian British, 4% black or black British, and 1% either Arab or another ethnic group. So I think in the CQC stats release, there's a description of the respondent profile within there, and it suggested improved rates of response from the minority ethnic groups, which is a positive step.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. And Giles Foster has asked, 37% response rate, is that more or less than previous years?
Okay, so again, I'll ask CQC to correct me if I'm misquoting anything here. I think the response rate was also 37% in 2018, but there was just a slight decrease by a few decimal places.
Yeah, that's correct, and that follows a trend with most of the surveys on the survey program, where we're kind of holding out with our response rate at present, which is good to see. We'd obviously like to see that go up in a upward direction, but we're holding out essentially.
Okay, great, thank you. So moving on, Ian, I think this might be a question for you, if you can unmute yourself. Nikki Lyon, thank you. Your question is there a way of easily reviewing the overall maternity CQC rating for trust?
Yeah, that is something we did look at. The problem we encountered is the CQC ratings, they don't actually give an overall trust rating. They give an overall site rating, and which is fine for single site trusts, but trusts like Bart's, which provide maternity services across multiple sites, there is no definitive overall trust rating for maternity, and that's the reason we excluded it. If I was to add it, it'd probably be as a separate table, because as I say, we couldn't really integrate it into the main national table due to the issue with sites, with different sites having different ratings. But if people think it's useful, I could easily add it as a separate table, just CQC ratings alone.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Ian. This might be another question for you, Ian. This is from Giles Foster again, and the question is, what was the better, same, worse category? Sorry, how were the better, same, worse categories determined in the tool that you presented? For example, age and ethnicity, was it against the England average, for example, or a more simple method? Hopefully, yeah. I've recorded that correctly.
Yeah, I think this is probably more a question for our CQC colleagues, as these ratings were taken directly from the published CQC Outliers reports. The full methodology is contained in the report, but if there's anyone on the call who could briefly summarise it, are they able to do that?
Yeah, the better, worse, and about the same methodology is it compares the trust score against the average trust score, so that's the average across England. And we process that score. We compare that score against the average score using a method of identifying outliers in healthcare healthcare research developed by a statistician called David Spiegelhalter. It's quite complex, and as Ian said, it is outlined in our technical documents. If you'd like any further information on that, do get in contact with me. That's adam.pegler@cqc.org.uk. And I'll be happy to talk you through that. As Ian said, it is fairly complex, but it's designed to account for the size of the trust and the variation in responses at that trust to allow for a more fairer comparison than say a pure league table or a ranking system or the top 10%. So it kind of takes into account the size of the trust. And in brief, it gives smaller trusts with smaller number of respondents more leeway, as it were. So yeah, the respondent numbers are taken into account.
That's great. Thank you, Adam, and thank you for sharing your contact email address. That's so much appreciated. Adam, I think this next question might be for you also. Very interesting from Nikki Lyon. Do we know that February births are representative? And Nikki's comment was, potentially you would get different responses at a different time of the year, for example, in the summer, August, September, when we know maternity services are particularly busy, or maybe a month with bank holidays. Is that something you can respond to, Adam?
Yeah, it is possible that there's seasonal variation in experience of maternity care, and given different pressures on systems at different times of the year. The sampling period is February, stretching to January. I'm I'm afraid I'm not aware of the original rationale for that. That predates my time here in the survey team, but I can look into that for you. And the reason that we maintain that is to maintain comparability across the years, so that we're comparing. We're not comparing. We're comparing apples and apples, not apples and oranges each year. We're not changing the sampling time frame. So that's a kind of historical, traditional period of sampling. But I can look into that for you more. Thank you.
That would be much appreciated, just out of interest more than anything. Thank you, Adam. Okay, so moving on to the next question that we've had in the chat box. Thank you to Lexi Oatley, which was around provision of translated surveys for non-English speakers. Adam and Amy, coming back to you on that one, maybe Nicola for next year.
Yeah, we don't offer, sorry, this is Nicola here, and we don't offer translated questionnaires for the survey, but we do offer helpline. So there's a telephone helpline for people to call if they do need assistance with completing the survey. And for this year as well, there's also an email helpline that's been added to that. So people who are maybe unable to use the telephone helpline can use the email helpline. And along with the mailing of the questionnaire, we do mail a multi-language, what we call a multi-language sheet, and that explains what the survey, briefly explains what the survey is about. So, and it's in the 10 most common spoken languages in England, and it explains briefly what the survey is about. So people who aren't going to be able to complete the English, the version, they can use the helpline to get sort of a translation service through that way.
That's great. Thank you, Nicola. Just to mention, if any of the questions that I'm asking that you've asked in the chat box aren't fully answered, please pop a note in the chat box and we'll pick it up. Hopefully we are answering your questions in full. So another one for you, I think probably Nicola. So this is from Amanda Driver. Thank you, Amanda. And Amanda was interested in the 20 trusts that are involved in the pilot. Is that something you can share?
I'm not sure about that one. I'm not sure if Adam knows off the top of his head the 20 trusts in the pilot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Sorry, Nicola. Yeah, no. Unfortunately, off the top of my head, I couldn't list the trusts. But if you'd like to get in contact with me at my email address, adam.pegler@cqc.org.uk, then I can inform you. That's no problem.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've had a few newer questions come into the chat box. Thank you, Nikki. Interesting question again, Nikki Lyon. So this is around the question of women being offered a choice of where to give birth. And Nikki's question is, can you explain whether a choice of hospitals includes consultant-led units, or are we saying that only 1 in 4 women were offered the choice of birth in the consultant unit? You might be able to answer that one.
Hi Nikki, it's James here. I may ask Adam to help with this one as well. I think with this question, the option of being offered a choice of hospitals reflects whether more than one hospital was offered. In terms of whether a consultant-led unit was offered, the results are showing that 25% of women were offered that choice. So that's what the results are suggesting. I don't know whether we can read something different into that around what women's understanding of the offer is, but yeah, the results are showing that 1 in 4 women were offered a choice of a consultant-led unit to give birth in.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, James.
I think that's a good question, and one that we could take away and look into separately as well. I think it's quite it's a good question, and lots to think about there. So we can if you'd like to get in contact with us about that, we can look into that into more detail.
Great, thank you, Adam. Lucy Pearsall, thank you for your next question. This is around the next survey being having the functionality to have analysis by LMS and your question is, how does that differ from the current STP analysis that Ian, you presented in the tool that you showed us today, because of them being usually coterminous? Who might be able to answer that one for Lucy?
I think there's a question of how data is mapped to local maternity systems in the future. I think there's some ongoing work to understand how we can do that, given the change to the geographical footprint of STPs and CCGs. So I don't have a definitive answer at this point, but work is ongoing on that.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, James. Okay, I'm moving on to a question from Pauline Bradshaw. Thank you, Pauline. This, I think, probably, Adam, relates to the earlier question from Nikki about February being the month when women are surveyed. And the question from Pauline is, has the impact of completing the survey in February, when sickness and absence might be higher, been considered?
Yeah, so this does lead on from an earlier question, and as I said, February is the traditional sampling period for the maternity survey, and there may be pros and cons to that traditional sampling, but we hold it at that mainly in the interest of comparability. But going forward, there might be some review of the sampling period if things do change and towards mixed mode methods and things like that. So this is certainly really good information that really good. It's the kind of information that we need to be considering going forward if things do change. So thank you, Pauline, for flagging that. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Nikki, sorry, I think you commented when we were asking one of your earlier questions, can it be found anywhere by trust? Overall trust rating would be useful, but I think you meant units. I don't think we can see the data by units. Adam,
Lisa,
can you confirm? Oh, Nikki, come on.
Hi, sorry for all my questions.
Please don't apologise.
To say, is it available anywhere on the CQC website, just to be able to see a list of all maternity units with their overall CQC rating?
So all maternity units, you'll be able to find the ratings, for a core service rating for maternity or maternity and gynecology on the CQC website, but I'm not aware that there is any central database publicly available to that end to kind of look at all the maternity units and have their kind of core service maternity ratings and the different key lines of inquiry. No, I'm not aware of a database of that type, I'm afraid.
Hi, yeah, it's Ian speaking. Yes, I do actually have access to the data that sits behind that. So I can, as I mentioned earlier, I can include an additional sheet in the tool which does break that down. So it's not available. It's not, the data itself isn't available on the CQC website, but it is the data which feeds the published ratings which are available. So it'll be entirely published data effectively. But yes, I can add that on the tool. It'll basically be a table that lists every trust, lists the units within that trust, and the CQC ratings, the most recent CQC ratings for that unit.
That would be fantastic, because I'm one of the safety leads, and I find it really difficult because I've never been able to find a list just for me to understand across the country how many requires improvement or in the different ratings. So that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand. It isn't actually available as a data file on the website, but I can actually integrate that into the tool.
Do you have a timescale for that? Are you saying you'd be able to do that relatively quickly?
Yeah, possibly within the next week.
Fantastic.
And when I do that, I'll send a revised version of the tool to everyone who's on this call.
Thank you.
Okay.
That sounds great, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. That's super.
Okay.
Okay, following on from that, there's another similar question from Carla Long. Thank you, Carla. Saying similarly, it'd be useful to have the overall rating for multi-hospital trusts. Is that included in what you will do, Ian?
Well, that touches on what I mentioned earlier, that there isn't an overall rating for multi-hospital trusts. There are just the unit ratings. So there's an overall trust rating for the organisation as a whole, but there's not an overall trust level maternity rating, which I think was a question.
Okay. Carla, hopefully that's answered your question. Thank you, Ian. Nikki, thank you. You've asked, do you publish the smaller surveys, for example, the bereaved parents? Is that a CQC question?
No, that's not. No.
James, is that something I can come to you on? Or Nikki, could you come on and just ask a bit more, give us a bit more information?
I thought there was a separate survey produced for groups who this survey wasn't appropriate for. But maybe SANS did something on it, but I'm sorry, I can't remember. But I thought SANS helped, and then CQC were the people distributing it. And it asked very specifically about bereavement care and things.
Hi Lisa, it's Hannah here. I can probably help a little bit with this. So probably about a year or so now, we pulled together a toolkit. Basically worked with SANS with Kath Evans, and she was previously at the organisation. And we pulled together basically a toolkit, which was a set of questions and advice on basically how to collect views of bereaved parents. And I can send a link to that, which we can send through with the slides later on, which has the toolkit on, I think it's the NHS England London website.
Okay, Hannah, if you can share the link, then we will include it in the email out to people invited to this webinar.
But please,
yes, Nikki.
Just say so that's some questions you might consider asking, but at the moment they're not formally asked of anyone. Because this question came up, I posted the CQC results onto a group who were very interested in maternity safety, and that was the question that came up when they saw that certain groups aren't invited to be part of this. They wanted to know where we find their views, and I did remember this bereaved thing, but at the moment we're not formally asking them at all.
No, we're not as part of the CQC Maternity Survey. No, unfortunately not.
Okay, thanks.
Which means we're not nationally, but Hannah, my understanding of the tool is that local trusts can use the tool for gaining that feedback locally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as part of the work, there was a survey with bereaved parents, a lot of work that established that basically maybe a more personal approach and less of a standardised approach was required. And it was also, I think, at that stage that, for example, people should be offered a face-to-face conversation rather than a paper-based questionnaire. And so it was felt when the work was done at the time that it would be better to do something locally. It does, however, mean that the data is kept locally and there's no nationally mandated piece of work. But I think when we did it, it was felt that that was the most appropriate way to do it. There's nothing to say, obviously, that it couldn't be revisited, but that was the recommendation at the time.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. That's really helpful. Okay, moving on. Thank you, Lexi. I think you've come back on a question that you asked earlier and we answered, and you have made a comment here. It sounds like there has been thought into gaining insight from non-English speakers or those where English may not be their first language. However, I wonder if this approach may need to be refreshed, given only a 14% response rate from Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups. Coming to CQC on that one.
Yes, I think there may be opportunity for us to change a lot of the ways that we work going forward with different as we're pursuing different directions with the survey, including as I've mentioned, mixed mode surveys. And I think again this is a good time for us to think about whether we could be doing anything differently, and we may have more options in this area in the kind of digital online questionnaire world as well. So yeah, that's certainly something we'll be taking forward. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Adam. Adam, I don't know if you can access the chat box. I know you gave your email address verbally, but if you'd be happy to put it in the chat box, I think there's a question asking for your email address. And Ian, just to comment a couple of comments. Oh, Adam, I can see you've put it. Sorry, scrolling down. A couple of comments, Ian, that people are looking forward to using the tool and that it looks great. So that's really positive. So one final question I can see in the chat box is from Emma Johnston. Thank you, Emma, which is asking, will there be a CQC survey for neonatal for more specific birth, postnatal mental health questions, assuming all those invited are not people that had an early birth?
That's an interesting question. That's not something that we have plans for at the time. But if you have any ideas for specific surveys, please do like those. Please do forward to my email address, and we can certainly start thinking about those kind of directions. Yeah, unfortunately, there are no plans for specific maternity surveys at this time. But yeah, thank you.
Adam, do you mind if I come in? It's Hannah. There was previously, I think, a PICA commissioned, I think it was from Department of Health neonatal survey. I think that ran yearly. I'm not sure if that still runs, but I can look into it. But there was previously a specific neonatal survey that ran, I think, on a yearly basis.
Oh, thank you for highlighting that, Hannah. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that neonatal survey. Yeah, thank you for highlighting.
Yeah, it may well not still exist, which is why we're not aware of it, but I know it certainly ran previously.
Great, thank you.
That's helpful, thank you. And Emma, thanks for raising that, because of course with workstream 10 in our maternity transformation programme now, we do have some specific work around neonatal, so really helpful for you raising that, Emma, thank you. Thank you. We have one final question from Miranda Berry. Thank you, Miranda. So your comment and question was, our trust has been asked to develop an action plan after this year's survey. Have all trusts been asked to do this, or is this related to CQC intelligence? Who might be best placed to answer that?
I think I might be best placed to answer that. I think this will be this ask will have come from a separate team at CQC, provider analytics team. I can look into this for you. It's not something that I'm aware of at this point. If you could email me with details, and I can look into this and I can answer that question fully for you. Thank you.
That would be really helpful. And for those of you involved in those action plans, just a pointer back to Laura's slide on this presentation about doing your best to involve the people using your local maternity services through your maternity voice partnership would be great. Wonderful.
Hi there. I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt.
We have time, so please go ahead.
Lovely. I've got two questions here. The first one is for the CQC. Just to ask, are any of those questions co-produced with women and families, or is it just more of a questions that CQC have come up with that they think would be beneficial to trust? Do you actually co-produce any of this with families and women?
Adam, are you happy to come in there?
Yeah, I think my colleague Nicola might be able to tell you about the development work for maternity for the 2020 survey, which will help understand the kind of processes and the way that we work to develop the questionnaires.
Yeah, so we held an advisory group, and that was stakeholders though. So we had representatives from NHS England, obviously. Then we had some charities who were represented there. We had the Royal College of Gynecology, so that was looking at last year's survey and looking at the questions and anything that sort of policy related that maybe needed to change, anything that needed to be added and whatnot. And then following kind of getting the feedback from stakeholders around what they needed from the survey, we then took it to cognitive testing with new mothers. So it was women who'd given birth within the last 12 months. So we do 3 rounds of cog testing, 6 interviews in each round. and we basically take the sort of we revise the questionnaire based on the stakeholder feedback, and we take that to into us, Bill Picketh, who we work with, take that to do interviews with women. And the purpose of that is to kind of ask them whether the questions, any new questions that we may want to ask, whether they make sense, essentially that they make sense to them. But it's also around a bit more broadly around the questionnaire, that the questionnaire generally kind of reflects their experience of maternity. If there's anything in there that kind of it just doesn't seem right to them in terms of maternity services, or if there's anything that we might have missing that they kind of think was quite prominent to maternity services, something that we really should be asking about. So that's kind of where we get the service user engagement in the questionnaire. Yes, through the sort of cognitive testing. So yeah, it has been we have engaged with service users in the development.
And that kind of development, thank you, Nicola. And that kind of development process occurs every time the survey, for every iteration of the survey. So the questionnaire is redeveloped each time with that kind of process in mind. In addition to that, we have our maternity mixed mode pilot, as I mentioned, that is now in field with a view to maybe making changes to the survey. And we have run focus groups as part of that. And if in the future we do move towards mixed mode surveys, there will be a big consultation period, an extensive consultation period with new mothers, and all of the all of our stakeholders. We always have in mind the ambition is always to create a questionnaire which is asking questions that are important to women and their maternity experiences. That's always the ambition with the questionnaire.
That's great. Thank you, Adam and Nicola. Laura, we've got a couple of minutes. I just wondered whether you wanted to just come on and comment on your involvement in the advisory group.
Question. Hello.
Just bear with us 1 second. Laura, are you able to unmute and just comment?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. That's really great. Yeah, so just to add to the question that was previously asked about how women are involved in the development of the questions, National Maternity Voices is one of the stakeholders on the advisory group, and National Maternity Voices represents and networks the maternity voice partnerships across England. So any of the questions so we have a voice at the table essentially, and any of the questions can be developed via the maternity voice partnerships, via service users that way as well. So we kind of go out to the maternity voice partnerships and ask them if there are any questions that they would like to see. Anyone can feed those in, and then National Maternity Voices has a seat at that table. So we are there representing the voice of the service users at those meetings. Just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Laura. That's great.
Thanks, Laura.
Hi. May I ask a question, please?
Please do.
Thank you. I was really interested in how the NHSEI tool can actually sort of benchmark outliers, both positive and negative. I'm really interested in that in terms of how we can use that to support improvement activity. So, for example, if we were commissioning a service which was sort of a negative outlier, what support is available to us to actually link in with some of the positive outliers or spread some of that learning and good practice?
Hi, Miranda, it's Katie Ratcliffe. So the Maternity Transformation Programme as a whole has multiple kind of safety and quality initiatives across it for offering support to trusts. But I think I think your question is specifically trying to get at is if there's something that comes up in the data which identifies a particular trust as an outlier, if there's a way of buddying them with a trust that's doing well or something like that. Is that what you're asking?
That's exactly what I'm asking, yeah.
I don't know if CQC have got something specific that they would say there, but I think the survey itself is probably kept quite separate from the regulatory functionality of the CQC. Adam?
So the survey results do feed into our regulatory activity. They do feed into our what we call our insight systems, which is basically our central hubs, which allow inspectors and other teams to look at data on certain trusts or certain sites. So the survey results do feed into those systems and then do inform regulatory activity in that they will be shared at regulatory planning meetings and which are the meetings that occur before inspections. Our survey results certainly do feed into to our regulatory activity. Yeah. Did that answer the question? Sorry, if it didn't, please let me know.
No, not really. It's more around, we already recognise that we are probably commissioning an outlier and we're already linked into our STP. However, is there anything that this survey can help us with in terms of improvement activity and links with other trusts? Or I don't know. It's very interesting in terms of data, but it's the so what question, what next?
I think sometimes in terms of developing partnerships, I think sometimes what the survey can highlight when comparing results using, for example, Ian's tool. I think sometimes it can. Sometimes I have anecdotal evidence that sometimes people find it useful to find a trust in their local area that has. Sorry, excuse me for the tannoy. Sorry if you can hear that. Some trusts. Bear with me. Sorry. Some trusts find it useful to find a trust in their local area which is a positive outlier. Has many questions that are more positive results than the average trust, and then to use their experiences and to find out about what they're doing in patient experience area. So I think that's one way the survey can help.
So it's very much based on individual action. There's not going to be any case studies or anything that will be produced centrally or by the maternity teams. From any of the sort of best practice areas?
That's unfortunately not something that we do regularly, but something that we're always interested in, and we're always interested to hear from people with stories of how the survey results have helped them improve. But no, unfortunately, that's not something that we publish regularly. Okay. But yeah.
I think Ian's tool is really helpful for looking at how other people are doing in a particular area, and I know that some of the Maternity Voice Partnership chairs are already liaising between them about, the trust that I'm involved in locally isn't doing very well on this, and your trust over there is doing really well. What are you doing differently? So I think that there's nothing to stop you making those partnerships locally to be able to learn from each other.
Brilliant.
That's what the local maternity system really is set up to do. So you would hope that the LMS would be reviewing the data performance within their patch.
Fantastic, thank you. Was there one other question that we didn't hear just before we finish? No? Okay, I think we're finished with Q&A then.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I think that was a really informative session. As we said, this has been recorded and will be shared. And we thank you all for your input. And if you have any further questions, please do get back to us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.